This month we've been exploring the origins of various names, streets, places and even pubs. Looking at the origins of sports teams' names might seem antithetical to folklore. Yet sport forms part of the ritual calendar for many people, whether on a personal or a mass scale. Look at the good luck rituals people follow before they watch their team play. Or how about the sporting events that become part of the folklore of a place through their regularity? Bearing this in mind, it seemed useful to look at the origins of sports team names. That includes both their official name and any nicknames they've accrued. Much like pub names, some team names refer to the history of the area, for example Arsenal. Others refer to the specific history of the team, like Sheffield Wednesday. And some are generic, designed to sound powerful or intimidating, like Whitley Bay Warriors. And others are just plain bizarre. So let's explore the origins of some sports team names in this week's episode of Fabulous Folklore. Hello there and welcome to Fabulous Folklore, the podcast for all things folklore, occult and just a bit weird. I'm your host Icy Sedgwick, blogger, fantasy author and your guide into these rather mysterious realms. I've got some rare things to show you, so come on in, take a look around, but be careful not to touch anything. These things sometimes bite. Well, hello there, and welcome back to Fabulous Folklore with me, your host, Icy Sedgwick. We are looking at what might sound like a bit of an odd topic for this particular podcast, because I think you've probably gathered by now, I'm not really a football fan, I'm not really a sports fan, if I'm completely honest. Apart from when the gymnastics are on, because I absolutely love gymnastics, but that's a complete side issue. But I thought, as I say, when I was looking at what we could have a look at the origins of in terms of names, actually sports teams would be quite a good one, and for the reasons I explained in the intro. So I should point out, because I am in the UK and football is the national game, then the bulk of my focus is going to rest on football teams. But we are going to take a detour into ice hockey and baseball in America, because there are some absolutely corking teams, and some which actually have a link to folklore, which I thought would be quite an interesting thing to have a look at. So we're going to start off with unusual football team names, and obviously this cannot be exhaustive because there are just far too many, and I have had to divide this particular approach, as it were, into two sections because there is a difference between a team's nickname and their official name. And many football teams, which obviously to any American listeners is soccer, are named after their location with a word like City, United or Town after them. Obviously some teams like to buck the trend, like Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest and Everton. And I should point out as well, because I thought this was really interesting, those teams called Wanderers took their name due to their lack of a permanent home ground. So I'm thinking here of something like Wycombe Wanderers. And actually, before I go any further, I think one of the other reasons I wanted to do this was one of my memories from a child was actually going to my granddad's house, and he would listen to the pools results. And of course, you would just hear these like mythical football names read out as they were going through the results. And certain names used to stand out in my mind as being unusual or interesting in some way. So for me, even though I'm not a sports fan, sport has still managed to be interwoven through a lot of my memories, particularly from childhood. So that has also in some way influenced my choice of teams as well. But as I say, so you've got things like Manchester City or Newcastle United and things like that. But then there are some football teams that choose different appellations that tell us a little something about them. So for example, one of them which has always caught my attention is Crewe Alexandra FC. Obviously the FC stands for football club, who are currently in League Two. And they actually grew out of a local cricket club with the same name, which is also something that I actually found was really common across quite a lot of football clubs, because cricket's only played in the summer and a lot of the players wanted something to do in the winter, so they set up football clubs. But where does the name Alexandra come from in Crewe Alexandra? Well, it turns out that the team is actually named after Princess Alexandra, Edward VII's wife. And interestingly, Crewe Alexandra is actually nicknamed the Railwaymen due to the town's involvement with the development of the railway. And I think it's Yeovil Town that's the Glovers because of their history in the glove manufacturing trade and things like that. So it's really interesting how these names tell you a little bit something about an industry that was associated with a particular place. Not so Tottenham Hotspurs, or Spurs for short, who take their name from the 14th century knight Sir Henry Percy, otherwise known as Harry Hotspur. And a group of schoolboys founded Hotspur Cricket Club in 1880 because they played on Northumberland Park in North London, and the park in turn was named for Harry Hotspur since he was Duke of Northumberland. So that explains why a Northumberland knight who was born in either Alnwick or Warkworth has somehow ended up giving his name to a team based in North London. Now, as I mentioned before about these cricket clubs then becoming football clubs, the boys founded Tottenham Hotspur Football Club in 1882 to give themselves something to do in the winter. I should note as well, Hotspur, who was born in 1364, fell at the Battle of Shrewsbury in 1403. He does pop up in quite a lot of history as a bit of a rabble-rouser, and he always seems like he's on the side of whoever's trying to bring down the king at the time. Yes, that's where Hotspurs come from. It's literally named after Harry Hotspur. Now, perhaps my favourite unusual name is Sheffield Wednesday, which is a football club that grew out of the Wednesday Cricket Club in 1867, and the name dates to the era when some businesses closed on Wednesday afternoons. So 6 local tradesmen thus had Wednesday afternoons off, so they became the founding members of the Wednesday Cricket Club in 1820, and then thus when they formed the football club, it became Sheffield Wednesday, which I thought was quite cool. Or Chef Wed, as I remember they used to get referred to on the telly. Now, I'm not just sticking to English football teams either, because this particular name really caught my eye, and that's the Kashima Antlers, and they are a Japanese team in the top Japanese league. They were originally founded in 1947 as Sumitomo Metal Industries Factory Football Club, but they were reformed and renamed in 1992, so they decided on their new name since Kashima, where they're based, is Deer Island in English, so it would therefore make sense to become the Antlers, which I thought was really interesting. You also have Ethiopian Coffee SC, who are in the Ethiopian Premier League, and they are based in Addis Ababa, and some theories suggest that they took their name from Ethiopia's most famous export. Others note that the founding members in 1976 worked at Kefa Coffee Processing, so it would make a lot of sense that they would then thus have coffee in their club name. Either way, it's a really good reminder of the legends that see coffee first discovered in Ethiopia, which I did mention in the episode about coffee folklore if you're interested. Finally, we talked in the place names episode about Santa Claus, Indiana, and then it popped up again in the street names episode, but it does seem that the jolly festive guy gets about because he also gives his name to FC Santa Claus in Finland, which I thought was marvellous. And Tom Hancock points out that the legend cites Rovaniemi as Santa's hometown, which would explain the name of the football team. They do also claim that they are Santa Claus's official football team, although I don't know if anyone actually knows which team Santa actually supports. I kind of see him being more of a Man United kind of person, if I'm completely honest, but that's just probably because of the fact he's in red and white. I don't know. But we are going to move on to football team nicknames, and this is the nickname that is usually bestowed on the team and they're affectionately referred to as that, or it's just what other people call them, like I say, Yeovil Town being the Glovers and things like that. Now, some team nicknames are relatively self-explanatory. So West Ham are the Hammers because they have 2 cross hammers on their club badge. And Arsenal are the Gunners because the team was originally created by munitions workers in Woolwich at the Arsenal there. Their original name was actually Dial Square FC, referring to the square at the Woolwich Arsenal where they worked, but over time the name became Arsenal when they moved to Highbury, which is in North London for anyone who's not familiar with London geography. After Newcastle United's historic cup win on 16th of March 2025, I couldn't not include them. I should point out that was, of course, historic for them, not in general. But as you might imagine, Newcastle United are referred to as the Magpies because of their black and white striped kit adopted in 1894. No, it's not a very exciting story, but to be fair, Liverpool are called the Reds for their kit. And if you are interested in magpies as birds, I do have an episode on magpie law if that is more your thing. And the last one I wanted to look at in this section was actually Sunderland AFC, which I did mention briefly in the last episode, that when I looked it up originally to find out why they're called the Black Cats, the website more or less said it's because there are black cats on the badge, which as explanations go is really quite unhelpful because it's like, they're called the Black Cats because there are black cats on the badge. But why are there black cats on the badge? And Paul at What's Behind the Badge is much more informative than the official website about this. And actually, indeed, if you are interested in football names and where they come from, then the What's Behind the Badge website is really, really thorough and goes into like why things are on the football badges as well. So highly recommended if you're into soccer and things like that. But Paul notes a very long link between Sunderland and black cats dating to 1805, when the men manning a gun battery on the weir renamed the gun the Black Cat because they heard a wailing black cat nearby. And yes, there is an episode on cat folklore. In 1905, so that's 100 years later, a black cat popped up, sat on a football beside the chairman. In 1908, a black cat then appeared in a team photo. And in 1937, 12-year-old Billy Morris took a black cat to the Wembley Cup final and Sunderland won 3-1. So the black cats on the badge preserve this wonderful slice of city folklore, and there's just generally lots of other associations with black cats and Sunderland Football Club and the team. So I just thought that was really cool that that's why they're then preserved on the badge. So that was quite an interesting one. And I think because black cats historically are usually viewed as being unlucky, they're quite clearly lucky in Sunderland's case. But I was, of course, looking at team names from other places as well, and obviously other sports naturally stood out. Some team names have thankfully been changed due to their use of racist stereotypes, and I'm not going to tell you what they were originally called, but you could look at the original name of the Washington Commanders, as they're now called. Other team names are much more straightforward because they refer to animals like the Bears, Falcons, or Eagles. There was a really interesting example, which is the Nashville Predators in the NHL, who took their name from a saber-toothed tiger skeleton that was discovered in the city in 1971 during an excavation, which is pretty cool. Other team names refer to traditional jobs in the area, like the Steelers, Packers, or Oilers. But I did mention that some also refer to folklore, and this is where we turn to ice hockey. So the New Jersey Devils play in the National Hockey League, and they're based in Newark, New Jersey. And originally based in Kansas City, Missouri, they moved to Denver in 1976 and then on to New Jersey in 1982, where they took their current name. And it is actually a reference to the Jersey Devil, not the Devil. Now, I've never really covered the Jersey Devil before, and I'm not quite sure why. So if you would like an episode on the Jersey Devil, please do let me know, and I can look into it in way more detail than I can possibly cover here. But just as a very, very, very brief overview, this particular cryptid apparently lives in the Pine Barrens forests in South Jersey. Obviously, as in South Jersey in America, not Jersey the island. Now, descriptions vary, although wings, a pointed tail, and fast movement tend to be common points. So in one version of the legend, a woman called Mother Leeds gave birth to her 13th child in 1735. During the birth, she cried out something like, "Let the child be the devil," and the baby took her literally, and it sprouted claws, a tail, and wings and flew away immediately after birth, seemingly going on to terrorise livestock. Originally named the Leeds Devil, the Jersey Devil name stuck in the 20th century. Now, there are sightings that do crop up all the way from the mid-18th century onwards, and one of them was actually by Napoleon's elder brother in 1820, which is quite notable. So I do think that was really interesting that a team would actually take their name from quite a prominent figure in American folklore, so I thought that was quite cool. There is also another one, which is Seattle Kraken, not the Krakens, just Kraken, who only joined the NHL in 2021. And they took their name from local folklore about a kraken in the area, obviously as in the Pacific, in that area, not just generally in Seattle. But the maritime history really played into the name choice here. So I thought that was quite interesting. That it was a name that I think they had a list to choose from, and kraken seemed to be the most popular one. But it's quite interesting, this turn towards mythical or folkloric creatures for different team names. And we are also going to finally look at baseball, where 3 other names stood out from minor league baseball. The first one that caught my eye was the Albuquerque Isotopes, who play in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and they actually take their name from The Simpsons, whose baseball team is the Springfield Isotopes. And in one episode, they wanted to move to Albuquerque, and a few years later, when Albuquerque got a baseball team, the name choice seemed obvious. Now, that entry doesn't really appear to have much to do with folklore, I grant you, but I did enjoy its connection to popular culture. And given The Simpsons often seem to predict things, it does make me wonder if they both predicted and enacted that particular name choice for the Albuquerque Isotopes. The other 2 names I've picked act far more like the pub names from last week, and they tie the team to the fabric of their hometown, either through its history or something it produces. We do also see this in English football as well, because Sheffield United, for example, are nicknamed the Blades because of the city's history of cutlery production. In our baseball example, we're looking at the Akron Rubber Ducks in Ohio, and they take their name from the city's association with the rubber industry. So companies like Firestone, BF Goodrich and Goodyear all first opened their doors in Akron. Now, it all began with B.F. Goodrich when Benjamin Franklin Goodrich secured loans to move his rubber business from New York State to Akron in 1870. And obviously that then kind of began the rubber boom in the area. It is true that rubber duck manufacturers switched to PVC in the 1940s from rubber, but because they're still so synonymous with rubber, it makes sense to use them in the team name. And finally, this is probably the finest team name in the world ever, and I just thought this was the best. And this is the Binghamton Rumble Ponies, and they take their name from Binghamton's apparent status as the carousel capital of the world. The city, which is in New York State, boasts 6 of the remaining 150 wood-carved carousels in the US and Canada. Shoe manufacturer George F. Johnson donated them to the city's parks between 1919 and 1934. And even more surprising, Johnson insisted the carousels be available to everyone for free, and they operate between Memorial Day and Labour Day for free, or you can also pay for your ride by picking up a piece of litter, which I thought was quite lovely. Now, this particular minor league baseball team was originally called the Mets, but I really do much prefer the Rumble Ponies. A, because it's a lot of fun to say, and B, I just think it's absolutely magical that they've named the team after these wooden carousels, particularly because when you look at the horses on them, they do look a little bit scary in a way that only horses on a carousel can. So there is something faintly terrifying about them, but I just thought it was an absolutely marvellous way to tie the team into this really, really unique thing about the city that wouldn't really apply anywhere else. So yeah, Binghamton Rumble Ponies, absolutely classic name. So I would love to know if you're a fan of or know of any teams with either unusual names or indeed the names which have links with folklore or figures from legend. Either is fine by me. And I just think it's quite interesting to see how folklore in a way then gets preserved through these team names, but how these team names then also preserve folklore like the Black Cats, or just literally a link with history. So as much as I said that pub names obviously help to preserve the names in the area, turns out so do sports teams. And as I say, if anyone's been sitting going, but why are you doing sport? As I said at the beginning, people have a ritual calendar of the year, even if it doesn't look the way you think it would. So when you consider the way that people will celebrate particular things because perhaps they appear in the Wheel of the Year or whatever, obviously other people might mark occasions by going to see their favourite team or something like that. And I think when things become tradition, then they're still worthy of study by a folklorist, even if it's something that still goes on in the 21st century. Also, I know this is going to sound really weird because I've already said I'm not a football fan, but congratulations to Newcastle United for winning the Carabao Cup. I'm not a football fan at all, but it was so lovely to actually see the lads win. So well done to them. Next week, we're going to be having a look at something a little more my lane, I think, which is the folklore of weird church names or unusual churches. So I'm just looking specifically at the names rather than the folklore of churches, because we're going to do churches next month. So like I've said before, whoever requested Lichgates, your topic is coming. But otherwise, I came across some really, really odd church names, and I was like, where did that come from? So I'm not going to be looking at obvious ones unless they have a really interesting story behind perhaps the saint they're associated with, like St Mary's Axe that were looked at with the street names. But yeah, we're going to be kind of looking at just really peculiar names like that. So again, if there are any churches near you with a particular weird name, feel free to let me know. Otherwise, there's a couple that I've got in mind, and it'll be interesting to see what else comes up. So I hope that you enjoyed the folklore of sports team names. Again, this is another one that I can always revisit in future if necessary. If you do have any other requests for other things throughout the rest of the year, then there is the request form below. I do occasionally get requests for stuff that I've already done. So if you're not sure if I've done something, the easiest way to check is you can either go to the podcast platform website that my podcast feed is on, and there's a search box, or even better, if you actually go on my website, there's a search box right at the very bottom in the footer, and you can put your search term in and it'll bring up like literally anything with that term in, and that at least will search the content of the blog post, so it's probably a little bit more comprehensive. So I'd probably recommend checking there first. But obviously if you do check and you find I haven't covered something, then by all means feel free to request it. Whether I cover it or not obviously does depend on whether there is actually anything about it or not. My final thing for this particular episode, actually there's a couple of announcements to do with talks that I'm doing. So I am going to be running the online talks programme for the Folklore Centre based in Todmorden, with my good friend Holly Elston, and we're going to be doing an online talk the first Wednesday of every month at 7 p.m. UK time. These will be recorded, there will be replays, so if you can't make it because the timing doesn't work or whatever, don't worry, you'll get the replay. And as I say, we're doing them monthly. We've got them booked up currently all the way into November. We've got quite a varied programme. So we've got everything from like LGBT plant law to corpse roads, which is what I'm going to be doing. We've got some Appalachian folklore in there. We've got the folklore of the fens and cars. We've got all kinds of cool stuff coming up. So I'm doing the first one, which is I think April the 2nd, which like I say is my corpse road talk, which is expanded with some additional corpse road folklore and legends. It would be lovely to see that. I'm not taking any payment for this, I should say. So while there is a ticket charge of £5, the money goes to help support the Folklore Centre, which preserves folklore and so on for everybody. So it's a good thing. So the link for that one is below, and obviously we will be promoting the rest of the programme obviously as time goes on. If you're in Newcastle on the 19th of April, I'm doing a talk on how fairies appear in Northumberland's folklore. That is at the Black Gate, obviously, which is attached to Newcastle Castle. I think it's at 6 p.m. So we will be talking about quite a lot of stuff that I've covered on the podcast, but put into a different format. So if you are around in Newcastle on the 19th of April, it would be absolutely marvellous to see you there. And finally, if you are in London on the 26th of April, I'm doing a talk as part of an event at Conway Hall, and I'm going to be having a look at 8 of the figures included in Rebel Folklore and grouping them together so we can see what we can actually learn from psychopomps or tricksters and so on here in the 21st century. So it's taking the figures that are in the book and then seeing how we can actually apply what we can learn from them. And yes, Scheherazade will be one of them because we all know how much of a Scheherazade fangirl I am. The event starts at 2 p.m. The link is in the show notes, as it is for all 3 of them. So if you are interested and you are in London on the 26th of April, it will be lovely to see you in person. As far as I know with that one, it's in person only, unfortunately. But that's the way that Conway Hall have set it up. But anyway, so I hope that sounds like it might be interesting to you. It will be lovely to see you at any or all of them, depending on where you are and where you can access them. The Corpse Rose one, at least being online, should make life a bit easier for you. But anyway, thank you so much for listening to all of that gubbins at the end, because obviously it is helpful to promote talks to people who will be interested, like your good selves. Anyway, I've rambled long enough now, I think. I will see you next week for the folklore of weird church names. See you later. Cheerio. Well, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, feel free to leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts, because that helps other people find the show too. It also takes between 4 and 6 hours to research, write, record and edit these episodes, so if you want to help support my time in doing that, then you can buy me a coffee. Or you can join the Fabulous Folklore family on Patreon and enjoy extra benefits, including exclusive episodes and articles and even illustrated talks. All the links you need are below, and thanks in advance.